Academic-wise, I'm a trained clinical psychologist and a psychotherapist. I've been in private practice. A large chunk of my work revolves around relationships, couples, marriage, parenting, and family. I also teach a course which is about how to counsel yourself and also how to learn to counsel others, to put it very briefly. It's called Art and Science of Self-Actualization. I also do workshops for groups and organizations and corporates. And I'm based in Hyderabad. Oh, the whole range of issues. I think any issue that happens to you because you're a human being. So it could be a general angst about who am I, where am I, why am I here, to I'm not able to get the kind of job I want, I'm not able to have the kind of marriage I want, I'm not being a good parent, anything, you name it, it's there. But a large portion of my work nowadays, especially, has moved to what I call the midlife crisis or existential crisis issues, where increasingly younger and younger people are beginning to have this, have to confront this question of all of this for what? So you start with do your 10th well, do your boards well, get your entrances right, get into the best schools, get the best jobs, preferably get a good girlfriend, get married, have children, have a house, have a car, and now what, right? So that quest actually is something that really keeps me interested and excited about the work I do. And also, an equally big portion of my work is relationships and marriages. We seem to be literally hurtling towards a stage where marriage, I'm afraid, may actually become obsolete, given the unbelievably complex issues and confusions that are happening in that institution. It's not as simple as, oops, I got attracted to somebody, can you help me how to stay back in my marriage? There's just a whole explosion of confusion going on. So that's also extremely enriching and rewarding once we recognize what drives people to do certain things and how they can use even that as a mirror to themselves, as a path to self-discovery, and as a path to actually really come into their own, who they are. So even a difficult marriage can be like a hero or a heroine's journey, where it's a rite of passage to find out who you really are. So that's the nature of my work. It's interesting you're asking that question, because I would think less than 10% of people of my clients have actually reached out saying, I'm dealing with bereavement or a death of a loved one or a death of a parent, as you're asking, which is intriguing to me because of all the traumatic events in life, losing a loved one to death, especially a family member, is rated as the topmost stress-causing event, a life event. It's called a life event, right? So it's intriguing that I can't say that too many people actually directly come to me saying, I've lost someone, help me deal with it. Oh yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes. So indirectly, yes. But I was just struck by your question. That is never the first entry point for seeking counseling. So yes, issues in relationships, issues in self-motivation, issues in depression, anxiety, especially social anxiety, or any kind of issue can actually tag back to an unresolved grief, unresolved experience of grief. Oh yes, I think many of us are in a hurry to quickly close it and move on, and it tends to linger somewhere in the psyche and show up in perverted, distorted ways in various behavioral challenges and psychological challenges. Yes. So I'd like to answer that in a slightly elaborate way, if you don't mind, in two different ways. So partly, yes, it is a modern phenomenon because the modern is associated with quick, fast and more. So it's like, can I quickly finish this and can I go and do some more of what I'm already doing? So in that way, yes, it's a modern phenomenon. Alongside the trend to not really honor all the traditional rituals that are associated with death and bereavement. But also there's another facet to this, which is to do with the essential masculine or patriarchal approach to everything in life. So what is modern, what is corporate, what is capitalistic, all of these, if you really sift them down to a core essence of it, it is to do with patriarchy and the masculine approach to life, right? So it doesn't work, chop it off, get on with things, that kind of thing. So I think when you ask that question, it is to do with if you're a man, then you're supposed to grin and bear it, have a strong shoulder, take it on, and move on quickly and be strong for the others. That's a mandate. And women unconsciously, for all their fight about feminism and equality and whatever, unconsciously have those as the standards for competing, for being there, or for being seen as equal or valid. So it's a very vicious kind of cycle. It perpetuates, yes. So I would go to the extent of saying that any change, any transition requires a ritual to pass through. Anything. So if you're relocating, if you're building a home, if you're destroying an older home, or whatever you're trying to do, which is the next thing, which is a change, which is a kind of a transition, a ritual is your little walking stick that helps you walk through that whole process. So it's not just the death rituals. Every single ritual has rich holding capacity for hand-holding you through that whole process of moving from point A to point B. Now, rituals like naming ceremony, the ear piercing and all, perhaps we can say, yeah, okay, we'll rush through it or whatever. But I think for something as important and as traumatic as death of a loved one, I think it is completely unintelligent to skip over those rituals. So yes, I think rituals have a place, they are necessary, and it is tragic that we have kind of completely ignored them. It's almost like we've thrown the baby with the bathwater. Essentially, as you said, because most of us are so disconnected from the origin and the meaning of those rituals, they don't seem meaningful to us. We are not able to relate to them. So yes, understanding why those rituals stand, what is the purpose, and then connecting and going through or applying them in your own bereavement process would be a very useful thing. And come to think of it, that maybe there are rituals are still being followed, but more in the letter than in the spirit, which is also why people remain unaffected even when they have supposedly conducted a ritual. So the point is conducting a ritual, right? That way. Yeah. So, as I was saying earlier, either completely skipping, ignoring, avoiding, or rushing through these prescribed rituals definitely has an impact. So, a very remote impact would be the social thing of, oh, look at these people, they aren't following tradition. That's a very minimal thing. But at a personal level, at a psychological level, which is of significance because that's the one that will show up later, what happens is I have not given myself the permission or the space to confront what happened to me when death happened to the other person, to the loved one, right? So when someone died, I experienced a loss. And have I really gotten in touch with the medley of emotions that arise as a result of experiencing loss? So in the rush to be strong or to move on, to not waste time on these things. If I just completely not engage with the process of what that ritual entails, or even engage with the process of simply weeping for my loss, then all I'm doing is I'm repressing that bunch of emotion, that energy, that bunch of emotions, to a place in my psyche, to an unconscious place in my psyche, to a dark dungeon, where it is not a dead thing that will stay quiet. It will then link up with something else and emerge in a slightly distorted form much later. So, for example, some of the typical effects of unprocessed grief would be melancholy. To describe melancholy, it is more complicated than depression actually. It's almost like a persistent, chronic loss of connection and pleasure with anything and everything around you. A feeling of being burdened by just being alive and having to run through the daily things of life, just not really caring about being alive or dead, kind of a numbness in anything and everything you do. Depression has a certain acuteness to it which won't let you be. Melancholy can actually, like a subclinical fever, just go on and on for the rest of your life. So that would be a horrible price to pay for not having processed your grief. Then of course depression, lack of motivation, lack of focus, lack of meaning in life, loss of purpose, all of these things can happen. While all of these are signs and symptoms of the phase of bereavement itself, unprocessed, they just get magnified, just get very badly magnified. For a very long time, they can remain there until they are looked at. And that could be 2 months from the time, or not 2 months is still considered the grief period, but 2 years or 20 years later, they can show up. So these unprocessed repressed emotions will definitely show up at some point in time. It could be as early as 2 years from the time of death or 20 years down the lane. But what triggers these repressed emotions back up into the consciousness or conscious interactions is usually an intimate relationship, which is very interesting to me, because a lot of relationship trouble also goes back to either in one or both partners to unprocessed grief. The grief need not be about death, but death is like the biggie, that can really impact the person. Yes. Replace, the word implies that there was some consciousness about its need and then we are doing something with awareness. I don't think so. So what has unwittingly happened, or what has unwittingly got replaced with, is what I would look at as reactive behaviors. So it could be as simple as indulging in unhealthy lifestyle choices, from overeating to binge eating to smoking, alcohol, pubs and movies, indulgences that we talk about. It could be that, which are all reactive. I don't think the person is really realizing that they're doing this because they're running away from something, right? It is because they're running away from it that this is what's happening with them, right? Then there are some people who I think resort to speaking to friends who unfortunately mean well, have good intentions but not the training, and cannot handle this. It is difficult. So many a times friendships come under fire, or kind of lose the luster, because the untrained, well-intending friend ends up feeling very emotionally burdened or exhausted or depleted, not knowing how to support this process, right? Then there are things like agony aunts in newspapers or magazines where you can write to and ask. I think in the West they have different self-help groups specifically for handling bereavement, which I doubt is even remotely happening in India. At least I'm not aware of them. So I think any habit, anything that will make sure that I don't have to look at it, becomes the approach. So it's not a replacement, it's a reaction. It's a maladaptive behavior. So yes, you're right. I think expecting a culture that's come this far to suddenly revert and embrace our existing rituals is a little far-fetched. Instead, what I would definitely suggest is something I would suggest in any case for any process, but especially death and bereavement, which is, can you pause and look at what you're feeling? Can you turn your gaze inwards? Can you focus on your inner scape rather than expending energy outwards? Can you really pause and connect with, this has happened to me and therefore what is happening to me, right? If you don't know how to do that, then can you seek help? Can you reach out to people who can help you do that? As opposed to friends who say, no, you gotta be strong, let's not cry. I'll take you for a movie, I'll take you for a coffee. So there is a collusion from well-meaning friends that encourages, avoiding, ignoring or suppressing whatever is going on. So can you have the pause and the presence and the courage to look at what's going on? Can you break down? Can you allow yourself to disintegrate so that you can reintegrate in a better way? Right? Because it's an event that has happened to you which is going to contribute to your enrichment if you receive it, if you embrace it, as opposed to shove it and run away somewhere. Well, indirectly they are culpable, the corporates are culpable, just by unthinkingly promoting the idea of faster, better, more, So somehow the idea of faster is associated with better, and faster is also associated with more, and more is associated with better again. Like the more I have, the better I am, the faster I am, the better I am, right? So especially if a senior executive, I'm sure this happens even at very younger levels or junior levels, but if a senior executive turns around to his boss and says, I've lost my mother and I want a month off, he's going to be scoffed at. Or he's going to be asked to take a sabbatical or take retirement. Or I don't know, I haven't heard of this kind of thing. So yeah, in that way they are colluding. They are, by refusing acknowledgement of it, of bereavement as a significant life event, they are adding to the same issue, same problem. So I think it depends on the kind of person the one is, right? So if the person has a predisposition to look at life as part of a larger cycle, and that this is one phase of the movement, right? And there is something before and then there's something after. Those people are more likely to seek meaning in afterlife ideas, concepts and beliefs. But then there are those of us who, I don't know, modern, Western, whatever kind of education we've got through, and I'm not talking just about schooling, the way our mind is educated, right? Believe that this is it. This is what there is, and the more you can get and consume and have, the greater your life has been, and that is all there is to it. They will neither seek that, nor actually believe that that's important. They actually, like you used a very interesting term, muscling, right? They actually muscle through emotions and therefore muscle through life. The position they take vis-a-vis life is one of war. So I'm at war and I gotta win at all times, as opposed to the other type of people where they feel I am part of life, and in going through this experience I'm also being very much a part of that life, and this has some meaning, something I'll discover over a period of time. So I think the mental set of the person will also determine what they will seek and how they will grieve and how they'll mourn and come out of it. This question, where is my mom, dad, whoever replaced with the person you lost? That question has, there are two layers to it. One is a very specific question of, she was here, her body is no longer here, where is she? So that's one kind of a question. The other thing is, now that she's not there, what about me? That's kind of a implied question in that, right? So I think for those of us who are trying to understand what happens to a person after they die, and therefore also ask the question of where do we come from before we are born here, that takes you onto a quest, right? It could be a religious quest, a spiritual quest, or a metaphysical quest, depending on what vocabulary suits you best. So that's a good thing. It takes you into realms of existence, realms of reality that you're not really normally, ordinarily thinking. So which is fine. So things like near-death experiences and afterlife and incarnations and soul work and soul growth and all those kind of things. But the other thing at a pragmatic psychological level is equally, probably more significant, which is about, so where is my mom and now what about me, right? So I think the way we relate to a person and their presence in our life, what that means to you is never clearly defined. And death in a way forces you to actually define it. It's only when you come to really clearly defining what that was, can you then let it go. Until you don't have the presence or the courage to really call all that thing out clearly to yourself, articulate it to yourself, I think it's pretty difficult to let go. So for example, this whole idea of, one has to let go, one must hold things like let go. In order to let go, I have to first have it in my hand and then I can let go, right? So same with selflessness. You've got to have a self to then say, I am now surrendering the self. You've got to have an ego to say, I'm giving up my ego, right? So I think defining what was available because of the presence of that person in your life is a critical process to recovering from their loss, yeah. Clarify this. Are you saying this is an opportunity for the person who died or the person who is alive? Because a lot of spiritual work is around that the work, living your life in a way that you are conscious and awake at the moment of transition, of dying. So therefore that's also an opportunity in the sense of what is the quality of consciousness you bring your last with, which then determines, supposedly, this is something I've heard, can't vouch for it, which then allows you to determine the kind of quality of life, existence, whatever it is, later, right? For the person who's alive, well, yes, so I don't think that there's anything very esoteric or spiritual about it. This is very real, very practical and very psychological, as if that is any little more real than the spiritual, right? Like I said, it breaks you down. So therefore, there is an opportunity to reorganize in a way that is more conscious, more aware, more healthful, more productive, all of that. Oh yes, absolutely. But I think you will miss the opportunity if you don't even look at what happened. So it's almost like you need to wade through the whole mark before you get the diamond. The diamond is always at the end of the tunnel. It's not right away, right there. Right? Yeah. Alright, so I'd like to clarify, just for the sake of making sure we all are on the same page, right? Patriarchy is not necessarily just this idea of the old-fashioned male domination and feminism as a reaction to that. It's not as simple as that. Patriarchy is a general mindset that has gotten so ingrained into our psyche, into our genetics, I feel. the way you relate to life as being adversarial, that I think broadly captures what patriarchy stands for. So from there you have things like capitalism, corporate ventures, and any approach that is my way or the highway, which works only with the real, the material, what is visible, what is measurable, what is quantifiable. Everything that is subtle and soft and untouchable, unquantifiable is just not just tolerated, but actually ignored or looked down upon or actively suppressed and repressed. So when we use words like patriarchy and masculinity, we are not at all talking about genders. Let's be very clear, because there can be women who can be the best representatives of some of these processes I'm talking about. So it has nothing to do with gender. So how does the patriarchal culture we are into right now affect grieving? I think in some way, I've answered this earlier also in the very beginning, it tends to diminish the value given to loss. Patriarchy has this approach of so what, loss is part of the game and let's move on, let's pick up and move on, as opposed to acknowledging it as a experience of being alive, and therefore there is a pain of having lost something. So I think acknowledging loss, which means revealing your vulnerability, or revealing the fact that you had an attachment that you're unable to deal with or let go, or you're feeling crushed, or you're getting devastated, you're having emotions, you're getting emotional. I think that is so not acceptable. That is what patriarchy does. So I think it hits hardest for death and grieving and mourning. Ways, yes, although I'm not sure it's directly related. So for example, I come from a village and farming background, right? So no one's actually pointed this out, but there's something I've sensed and picked up. So for example, it's allowed and expected that a man can grieve for his mother a lot more than he can really grieve for his father. And then if a man actually shows any grieving for his wife, he is not considered to be really a good enough man. Because it's like, get on with it. You'll get another wife. So it can be as gross or as, So that's one thing. Plus also I think the way you relate to the person who's no more decides the nature and process of your own grief, right? So if you had a real, authentic, wholesome kind of relationship. By wholesome, I'm not necessarily talking of beautiful and healthy. I'm talking about a relationship that includes everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it's real, it's lived. Then I think grieving actually is easier and smoother and faster, right? As opposed to a relationship which is extreme, which is either all goody-goody, which is not real, or all really difficult and traumatic, which is, traumatic, right? Then grieving actually becomes a lot more complicated, a lot more difficult. So the nature of your relationship with the one who's passed on is probably the single most strongest determinant of how it will affect you and your process of grief.